All right, everybody. This is episode 76 of Now Showing with Mike and Wayne. Wayne is back with us. Wayne?
Hello! Only 364 more days till Christmas. I am so excited.
We'll get there. It's, I can't wait to spend more money on my child. It's a fun experience, though, as an adult, to make your child happy.
Yeah, no, it makes it worthwhile when they're excited about the things that they open, but then secretly in the back of your mind, it's like, you're adding up. It's like, how much did I spend on this child? Good Lord. I know that was me anyway, so.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure.
Do I really love him that much? Yes.
You really start to question a lot.
Especially when they first start talking back to you after.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Like, or if they ever, and now Donovan didn't do this, but if they ever finish unwrapping their presents and they're like, is this it? You want to, then you want to start something. But he didn't do that. So he was very grateful. All right. So with the new Matrix movie coming out this last week, we are going to talk the Matrix franchise, the first 3 movies. I've never seen Animatrix, so we're not going to talk about that one for anyone that's a fan. So I apologize.
And that's a good thing because I had forgotten all about that it even existed. So,
it's funny because I feel like we'll probably spend less time on the first one only because we've talked about the first one before, and the first one's essentially a masterpiece in filmmaking. In the time it came out in 1999, the special effects were incredible for that time.
When you start getting mimicked, and forgive me the correct word, I can't think of it with my fog.
Mimic's a good word. That makes sense, yeah. People copying off of you.
Yep, like Scary Movie. I know they mimicked it with the whole bullet time, and it's just that you've achieved something great. And I remember seeing this and just being completely blown away. I was like, "Holy cow!" Because everybody was talking about Matrix this, Matrix that in 1999, and I waited a couple months before I saw it, and I eventually saw it with one of my high school buddies that I was only really fringe friends with. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "No, nothing." He's like, "I was looking for somebody to go see The Matrix with, and everybody else has seen it." I'm like, "I have not. Let's go." So we saw it. It was like, dude.
Just, it's one of those movies that you do kind of pity the newer generations because they missed it. I do, like, for my son, he's into the Marvel movies, so I pity him that he didn't get to experience the beginning of it with Iron Man. As I do anyone who didn't get to experience the kind of the dawning of a new generation in action film. Like, this set the bar and jumped over the bar all on its own. And like you were talking about mimicking, like in the Scary Movie, of course they made fun, it was parodied and stuff.
That's the word I was looking for. Parody.
Yes, parody. But they also inspired or were stolen from on numerous occasions, with the one with Jet Li and Equilibrium with Christian Bale, which I think is a great movie. But movies after The Matrix started to take what they had done and tried to do it or do it better. Most failed, some succeeded, not in doing it better necessarily, but in at least kind of making a decent film. So
doing it justice, if you will.
Exactly. I equate it to like Jurassic Park. When Jurassic Park came out, that set a new bar. The Matrix did the exact same thing. So if imagine that, think of it that way. The Matrix was able to set this world up that we didn't know anything about. Kind of like, I imagine, Wayne, it would have to be like seeing Star Wars for the first time. That's what I think about when I think about this movie, because it sets up this mythical world that we're just kind of thrusted into as well. There's not much, there's maybe like 20 minutes of setup, and then it's like, boom, this is the Matrix. This is what you're in for. And even, the cold open starts with Trinity running from bad guys, so that you kind of get a small piece of what this movie is going to be like. Yeah. And then she disappears. So then you're kind of left with like, wait, what kind of movie am I watching? What is this? Because the next shot is Keanu Reeves at a computer desk being a hacker. So it's kind of like it kind of goes in two different directions in the beginning of the movie until it finally comes to a head somewhere in the middle there. Rewatching this movie, Keanu Reeves has been considered not a great actor, but he always it has to be the right part. And even though I've seen this movie a million times, I've always kind of thought like, oh, he's not great in it, but it's a decent role for him. He's actually pretty good in this movie, in this franchise overall, as compared to some of his other movies where he's not great. I think the role of Neo fits him perfectly, and it was a testament to the Wachowskis to see that in him. And he wasn't the first choice, but he was obviously on the list of people that they had in mind, and the thought that he could bring this character to life. And I thought he did a fantastic job. Go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, Keanu Reeves, he is not a great actor. Nobody's gonna get in that argument. But as a person and just the actor who he is, I absolutely love. He is one of my favorites. Just because of the roles that he does produce, I've always enjoyed. Even stuff that gets called in question, like The Lake House. I love it probably because it is Keanu Reeves. Obviously, going into this one, it's like, all right, Ted knows kung fu. It's like, whoa, and he does go whoa in this, and it's like but yeah, no, and then you do a little bit of investigating into Keanu Reeves' life and his backstory and all the shit that he's been through, and you see the the stories about how he gives up his seat on the subway and all of the money that he got in royalties for this Matrix he gave to the post-production department for doing what they did, and just an amazing guy, and you just can't help but root for him. So
yeah, he definitely seems to be an amazing person. And you said the fact that he gives up his seat on the train, the fact that he rides the train sets him apart from most Hollywood people. The fact he's just a different dude, and he never, he's got the money and stuff, and he's got the ability to do a lot of different things, but he never seemed to let that change who he was, and he's always been that person. And I think that those characteristics definitely go well into Neo, because that's the type of person that Neo's supposed to be. He's a person who will give up his seat to anybody that needs it and sacrifice things for people, like he does in this franchise, because he is the one, as they say throughout this franchise. But yeah, just this first movie, the special effects, the bullet time, like you mentioned already, it's just amazing. What was crazy to me about this movie was that how great the special effects were for 22 years ago. I just watched it again. I've seen it again several times. But I pay attention more, trying to pick out parts like, okay, like, could this have been done better? Could this part have been done better? Could the special effects, could they have been crisper? Honestly, in this first movie, I didn't see anything that really could have been upgraded. Everything was perfect for the time that they had it. They didn't try to, I think, overexert themselves in the special effects department. I do think later on, we'll get into the next sequels, I think that became a problem later. But in this first movie, I think everything was so tight. They had the story. Like Star Wars, when it came out, they didn't need any sequels. The first movie ties everything up in a nice little bow. But of course, because it was so popular, we get a franchise out of it. Right. So wait, what are your final thoughts on the first movie?
I just, you got your antagonist, you got Agent Smith and the other agents, and then you've got Cypher as the turncoat, if you will, and just everything plays in so nicely, and everything just flows. And like you said, the subsequent movies that follow are just, I would say, victims of just not enough time, not necessarily enough money, but just not really allowing things to ferment and really think things through, if you will. And we're going to get into that in a little bit, but yeah, let's stick with this one. I have no complaints whatsoever. Just everything about that, even like the little things. It's like, it's not the spoon that bends, but your mind.
There's so many good lines in it. I didn't mention, you talked about some of the other characters, Joey Pants, Lawrence Fishburne, Carrie-Anne Moss, all of them fantastic in this movie. Other good character actors as well. There's different, more well-known cast members that join later in the other movies, or in the next movie rather. But yeah, I mean, if like this is a movie, like if you've been waiting to watch The Matrix, like now is the time. This movie is amazing. It really, like I said, it set itself apart back in 1999 as the quintessential action film of, we'll even say, of the early 2000s, because it came out in 99, but it really, it had its grasp over the early to mid 2000s for quite some time. But like everything else that's successful, we then get, as we talked about, sequels. And we got The Matrix Reloaded in early 2003. So here's the setup for these next two movies. They greenlit the sequels almost immediately. They started working on them like almost right after The Matrix had ended, or stopped its box office run and stuff, because they were filming this in like 2000 and 2001. Because one of the woman that plays the Oracle in the first and second movie shot all her scenes in 2001 for the second movie, and this movie didn't come out till 2003. So she had 2 years prior to 2 years after her death, her last movie came out. And they were filming. She did not get to film her scenes for the third one, so they replaced her in the third one. But it's the Oracle, so you can really just cast anybody. But anyway, off topic here. They set out to do something like, it was almost like they were like, oh, well, the Lord of the Rings can do one a year for 3 years. We could do 2 in 1 year. They really set on this ambitious task that didn't need to happen. I don't think they could have waited longer in between the two sequels. Now, granted, Reloaded and Revolutions are basically tied, tied together. Like Reloaded ends with the to be continued type of thing, or to be concluded, which I forgot. I was like, oh, that's kind of clever. So here's what I learned, Wayne, from rewatching Reloaded and Resurrections. So Reloaded, I've always thought was the second best movie in the franchise, and I've thought that for many years. And I finally rewatched it, and it's so long.
Yes.
It's so boring in the times where there's no action going on screen. I am not a fan of all the Smiths. I realized I'm kind of, it annoyed me more than anything. Yep. The special effects, as we were talking about, these were better special effects. They looked awful.
Yes,
there's so many scenes where people are jumping that you could tell they decided not to use wire work this time, which they used in the first movie a lot and in the third movie a lot. And it reminded me of Blade 2, a lot of the really terrible CGI in that movie.
Yes.
The freeway scene is still badass, so I'll give them that. The ghost characters, those guys are cool still.
There's the Skull and Dreadlock boys.
Yeah. Yes. The cultural appropriation boys. The end of the movie, and this is a spoiler if you haven't seen Matrix Reloaded, is basically Neo talking to the architect, and it's basically a giant exposition dump. Like, they basically tell you everything that they think you need to know going into the third movie. So it really just serves as a point to move the plot along by dropping you in the middle of a room of this big action movie with two people talking for like 25 minutes about what this movie is about. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, when I saw this, I was like, yeah, that was good. I couldn't understand. Right. And the reason I bring it up too is the second movie rated much higher critically than the third movie. So I just didn't, it felt boring to me, the second one. It really did. The characters were not as fleshed out. Neo just kind of doesn't really have a lot to do. Since he becomes the One, he's very much like a drone character, very robot-like.
Yes, and no growth at all.
It was weird. It was weird to have such a successful first movie, a great character development for all the characters throughout, and then to have one where they all just kind of stall.
Yes, and not just to, even when they get back to Zion and they have that really tedious love scene versus the dancing and it's like, I watched these probably 3 or 4 months ago.
Okay,
and I was sitting there and I'm like, I get the point that they're trying to make, the deep connection that Trinity and Neo have, but it felt, I don't want to say forced, but that's the word that comes to mind the most. With this whole, like, look at the love, look at the connection, look at humanity's going to be saved.
Yeah.
Like, ugh.
It really grains on you, this movie. And, someone on Twitter that I follow wrote, she's like, I fell asleep during Matrix Reloaded when it came out 20 or 18 years ago, and now I know why. Because they watched it again and they're like, Jesus Christ. Like it's a slog, man. I think back when I saw it in theaters in summer of 2003, I wanted to like it so much that I convinced myself that I did. And I just and then because we'll get into the third one in a minute, but I just I don't know. I don't know what what I think the right idea would have been to take the ideas from 2 and 3 into one movie. You could have some of the stuff in Reloaded. You could have the freeway scene, some of the story and stuff between him and Smith, and then you get the basically the back half of 3 is the rest of the movie. And I think you have a much more solid film. But if we don't get these two kind of somewhat mediocre films, maybe we don't get a fourth redo years later. So there, it is one of those things. You kind of either way, you don't know which is better, which way is the best way to go, I guess. So wait, any more thoughts on Reloaded before we jump into Revolutions? I keep too many R words.
Yes. I love Neo Superman. I love the black look.
Yeah. That line. Yeah. He's doing his Superman thing. Yep. Harold Perrineau really brought it in Reloaded. He was really good. I like that he stepped in. I think there was some issue with the actor that played Tank and why he didn't return, whether he didn't want to return or wanted more money or something like that.
I think we talked about this in a previous episode. I think it was a money thing. I think he wanted like millions of dollars to come back. And it's like, yeah.
Similar to the whole roadie thing in Iron Man as well. Like, man, you're not the star. So we get Harold Perrineau, different character, but he plays like a friend of Tank and Dozer. Mm-hmm. And then we also get who I think was a good addition, Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith. And what's funny about that is Will Smith was actually the top choice to be in The Matrix and turned it down to do the lovely film, The Wild Wild West. Will Smith has gone on record to say that this is his one regret in his movie choices. And I completely understand. However,
I could actually see Will Smith pulling that off, though. I really could. I could see him.
Yeah, it would be a different character, but it would be, it would still be in his wheelhouse, I think. He would still do it justice, but it would totally be a little bit of a different character because of how Will Smith is. There'd be definitely more whippy and quippy one-liners, I think, in the film if he had done it. But yeah, I think Jada Pinkett did a good job, despite the fact that like I said, this movie is not great. I think she is a bright spot in Reloaded, and kind of makes the movie worth watching to an extent because she does kind of become more heroic in it towards the end. The whole Zion stuff, like you talked about, like I didn't really like much of that anyway. I get that they had to have like a home base of where the humans were. I just was not enthralled with that at all. And the politics take me back to Phantom Menace where they're talking politics at you for an hour and a half. I was like, I don't really need this. So yeah, not my favorite. I think it's actually the worst one now, in my opinion. We're going to move on to Revolutions, which is the third one. Came out the same year as Reloaded in December. Starred everybody the same. No major, I think because it's basically a direct sequel, there really weren't any big character additions to this third movie. I don't really care for the plot. The whole, he's Jesus at the end and he sacrifices himself. However, I like this one more now because this one at least is basically entertaining from beginning to end. It's almost just action from start to finish. The story doesn't make a whole lot of sense anymore, but you get just like kick-ass action sequences, even when they're outside and doing the, Neo and Trinity are going to the robot base. Like that stuff's intense with the one guy who Smith infected. And again, the whole Agent Smith thing, they actually, that somewhat takes a back seat in this one. And I appreciated that because it annoyed the shit out of me in watching Reloaded again. Like the whole Smith fight in Reloaded, I could care less. So I was glad to see him take somewhat of a backseat in the third one. His character is more the guy who's in the human world, who's played by a different actor, we see more of him than we do of actual Smith, played by the wonderful Hugo Weaving, who was also in Lord of the Rings at the time. So he had two franchises at that moment.
Talk about being on top of the world there.
Yeah, seriously.
Hugo Weaving in the early 2000s.
And that could have cut down. That could have cut down on his availability for Reloaded in Revolution, so that may be why he wasn't in Revolutions as much. These names are, as you can tell, these names are tripping me up. I apologize.
The battle for Zion was something that was fun, with just like,
yes,
all
the dude squids. With the one guy with the gun, the double gun and stuff, and the kid trying to reload it, and then he takes the suit. That stuff was badass, and that's what I'm saying. Like the Zion stuff and Reloaded, I didn't need. I guess they did it to set up some of those characters, but you could have quickly just set them up, and I would have been like, that's fine. I know who these people are. Right. Doesn't matter.
I'm not going to remember their names anyway. So.
Right. I still don't remember their names, but there was in Resurrections, Resurrections. God damn it. In Revolutions, they were way more badass than they were in Reloaded. So yeah, that was the one thing that kind of twisted me, is rewatching these. I was like, wow, I actually like the third one better. And I didn't think that was going to be the case. I was dreading watching the third one when instead it was the second one. And I was like, holy crap. Like, why?
I'm already through the worst of it.
Yeah, seriously. And I think it just made, because I realized the second one was not great, it made me enjoy the third one more. It's still not a good movie. It has its flaws for sure. It continues the plot of Reloaded. That's one of its biggest issues, but there's nothing we can do about that. One thing I did read on the internet this week on Twitter, and I do agree with it. Each sequel does take time to consider what happened in the previous movie and wonder if what had happened is best and kind of leads us in the direction of where the next movies are going. And that's something that's continued in the one we're about to talk about. I think that part is clever, to always kind of questioning what you're doing and where you're going. And we'll even get into a more meta situation in the newest one. But yeah, that again, that's my final thoughts on the first trilogy, is that Matrix is a masterpiece. Revolutions, while it has its problems, is pretty good. Reloaded, boring. Freeway Sing is awesome.
Yep.
Rest
Other
of the movies,
than that, don't really need it.
It's really not many redeeming qualities. What are your final thoughts on the first trilogy, Wayne?
You basically hit the nail on the head. I mean, if we could have gotten something, if the second movie would have been a little bit more grounded, I want to say grounded, just in the fact that obviously the whole idea of the Matrix and this, living in a simulation, it's out there and whatnot, but like focusing more on like getting the people out of it as opposed to the grandiose of everything that they're trying to accomplish in the second one. Yeah. I think we would have ended up with a better trilogy, if you will. And it was hard for me to follow. Again, I'm just a simple man with simple intelligence. It was over the top of my head. So
yeah, it was, like I said, it just was too much. Too much of stuff that I just ended up not caring about anyway. It was like just the architect and all that stuff, and it was just kind of
when Neo gets blinded, and then that whole deal, but he can still see because he sees the Matrix, not just through his eyes.
Strange. All right, so now we're ready for our next segment, reviews
of the week.
And this week, the first one up, as I'm sure you could have all guessed, is The Matrix Resurrections. Directed only by Lana Wachowski this time, as she returned. Her sister did not. It was written by Lana, David Mitchell, Alexander Hernan. Let's see, James McTeague, who's one of their people, directed V for Vendetta. He produces on this one. Along with Australian producer Grant Hill, not the former NBA basketball player. All right, so returning for this one are Keanu Reeves, Carrie-Anne Moss, Jada Pinkett Smith, and Lambert Wilson. Those are your main returning people. They are joined by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, who plays Morpheus, but don't everyone freak out, it's really in a different way. Yes. Jessica Henwick, who I love. She's great. Jonathan Groff, who was fantastic in this. Neil Patrick Harris, who I did not expect to have such a large role, and I thought was really good in it.
Definitely and also, one of the brightest spots, for sure.
Yeah. Priyanka Chopra Jonas, married to one of the Jonas brothers. All right, so we return to the Matrix. Basically, that's how this one is set up. It's a meta movie within. So, and it's also the Matrix with inside the Matrix is part of the story that's going on here. That's kind of where Morpheus comes from. He is a character inside of a video game that Neo, now known again as Thomas Anderson, has created. We are going to reveal some things, not obviously all of them, but it's hard to talk about this movie without revealing some stuff that happens.
Right.
So you start to find out that so he's Thomas Anderson again, which is his character in the first movie, and before he's Neo. You find it starts with Jessica Henwick breaking out as Bugs, breaking out Morpheus from the video game within the Matrix. So it gives them like taking a video virtually created character and then making him a self-aware virtually created character inside of the Matrix. So it's you kind of have to get your head around it, which is why it's not Lawrence Fishburne, because in the video game he made him a much younger person, which ends up being Yahya Abdul Mateen from the second from Aquaman and many other things. Then
supposedly
we jump to
a big passage of time as well. I don't know how much we're gonna.
Yes, there is. It's about 60 years. About 60 years, I think they said. So we then get our new team, which is Jessica Henwick and a bunch of other new characters who are trying to re-rescue Neo from the Matrix. So it's kind of like it's a sequel, but it's also a redo at the same time. Like it's kind of like everything has started all over again. Yes. Basically, the premise is that Neo and Trinity have been saved and then re-uploaded into the Matrix. That's the premise of the story. Obviously, Neo being
Would you say they were resurrected?
Yes, maybe. So since Neo is the one, Jessica Henwick and her crew decide to go in and rescue him against the orders of the new general, played by Jada Pinkett Smith, who returns as Niobe. And she's kind of become more grouchy and more like the old general, and where she doesn't want to put everybody at risk to save one person, even though that one person could be what ends the Matrix essentially again. So you kind of have to be okay with. Again, it's a sequel, but it's more of like we realized that not everyone liked Reloaded and Revolutions a lot, so we're going to try to redo that whole ending again. I think for the most part it makes sense. I understand the computers wanting to kind of try to keep Neo under lock and key. I'm not gonna. It's hard. See, this is hard. This one's a hard one to talk about because I don't want to reveal things, but at the same time, it's hard not to. I'm going to reveal this, and so spoiler if you don't want to know this information. Jonathan Groff plays Agent Smith in a kind of a newer version of him, and I thought he was great. Right, Wayne? Yes. What do you think?
Without giving anything away, wow. It was. It's not. It doesn't turn. You think it's going one way, and then it just completely flips you around. So
yeah, it was one of those turns that I wasn't expecting. I saw something on Twitter, on social media, where someone talked about Jonathan Groff. I completely forgot he was in this movie. They made a comment on like how he's great and everything or whatever. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I like him. And then when he popped up, I was like, oh, so this is what they were talking about. This had to be the movie they were referencing. And then
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One of the things I appreciated was how they used the old footage to kind of advance this storyline along. It helped piece things together for me. And I think it was used in a really tactful way. Because, we will see clips of Larry Fishburne, and we will see clips of characters from the original trilogy. It's like, oh, okay. And just like, and almost like flashbacks, obviously it's flashbacks, but
yes,
intentional.
Yeah, that part was cool because people were upset that Fishburne and Hugo Weaving weren't returning, but I think they give enough of them in the flashbacks to where you go, okay, the spirit of them is still there. Spirit of Morpheus. When we get to Zion after they get Neo out originally, there's a statue resurrected of Morpheus. So I thought that was a really cool kind of representation of the character that he was. I don't know what I was expecting out of this movie, but I think they took their idea from Scream and maybe a little bit like Doug and I and you were talking about Rocky Balboa, a little bit of how to do another sequel, and Scream 4 did it perfectly. It was very meta. It was very on the nose. It knew what it was doing. I feel like this one knew exactly what it was trying to do too. Basically, having the Matrix be something within the real world and within the fake world at the same time, I think kind of it gave it this whole meta spin that they were looking for. I actually really liked this movie, Wayne. I don't know how you felt about it, but I wasn't expecting much. I don't think. I was just like interested to see where it was going. I'd only, I think, seen one trailer when it was originally coming out like a year ago, and I avoided all other trailers since then because I kind of wanted to be surprised.
Well, I was really upset by the trailer that I saw. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Excuse the language. Sorry. I was like, and then I was victim to looking at a review score without looking at any detail. And then all of the flood of, oh my God, this is trash and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I had a negative. I'm like, oh, crap. Cause I really, I loved the first one. Like we all do. And it just set me up for disappointment. And I'm not saying I'm disappointed. It's just, and it's not a disappointment. Don't read the reviews about how it's complete and utter trash, because it's not a complete and utter trash. My biggest feeling is I don't know if this was needed, and it kind of hurts me to say that.
Okay, I get it. Yeah, I don't think anyone was really asking for it, but for me, I'm willing to accept it, and I think it was something that I will watch again. I think to me, it gave me the closest feeling to the original that I could get. I know we've had a lot of these remakes / I'm going to say / sequels because they've been kind of like a retelling, like Coming to America that we've talked about, where the critical reception hasn't been as great. We have liked them, I think, more than most people. The nostalgia, Bill and Ted is a good example. I didn't have a lot of nostalgia for this time because I was already kind of close to being an adult when the first Matrix came out, and then an adult when the last two came out. So it wasn't like childhood nostalgia like for the Goonies or for Ghostbusters. And I know there hasn't been a Goonies movie, but you know what I mean. Like if there were to be Goonies 2, I would have that childhood nostalgia too.
I think they should totally do a Goonies 2 with everybody today's age. I think it would be amazing.
Would be amazing. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I had a good time with this movie. In one day, Wayne, I watched all four, and this one was a nice capper, I think, on the whole all four movies. It doesn't quite reach the level of the first one, but I think it does get close to it. And I think, critically, I think it's at like 67% on Rotten Tomatoes. I would go a little higher. I would say, in my opinion, I would give it an 8 out of 10. I think
let me jump in right now. Do you think this movie needs a sequel, though? I'm going to actually say I would be okay if they do it correctly and they carry on the story, but it needs to be done correctly.
It does. I don't want them to rush it. I think they find themselves in a unique position because the box office wise, it's doing okay. It's pandemic still. Obviously the numbers are up and stuff. It's not Spider-Man, so it's not going to break any records. I think they'll have time this time around where they can go and kind of create something more organically instead of the studio going like, we need another one now. They can let Lana go like, all right, you know what? Go take some time. If you have another idea for this franchise, let us know. We'll be interested. I don't think it needs to be rushed. I think if they take their time, it will work. Having Keanu and Carrie-Anne Moss back was amazing. And both of them look, 20 years ago, they looked the same, for God's sakes.
Basically.
For the most part. They try to make them look older-ish, I guess, with a little bit of wrinkles, but they basically essentially still look the same. Yeah, I mean, it's a fun movie. It's got lots of cool action sequences to it. The motorcycle scene towards the end I thought was really cool. Again, I really love Jonathan Groff's turn in this one. NPH is something to behold. It's a very interesting character. I don't want to give away what his whole thing is.
fantastic job though, being what he was.
Yeah, oh yeah. And I like too that Lambert Wilson, who was in Reloaded and Revolutions, comes back as the creepy Frenchman. But he's like a virus now, basically inside the Matrix. So I thought that was really clever. They did that with a few of the other viruses, where I think characters from the other movies, but they weren't recognizable. Where he was obviously he had the most lines and stuff. Yeah. So I don't know. To me, like I said, it was 8 out of 10. Wayne, what would your final score be on it?
I was gonna go 6.5, 7.
Okay.
But again, like I said, if done correctly, I would like them to continue the story. I would like to see where Neo and Trinity go from here and what happens. Because honestly, we need to know if the Matrix is going to be fucking destroyed and if life will ever exist without this fucking parallel dimension simulation that people
or will they find a way to live in harmony? Like that's kind of what the premise is like, will they find a way to live together essentially? Yeah, and it was great to have Keanu back in this role again. I just want to say that because Keanu, like you said, he's awesome and as a person. So just to kind of have him, I'm always rooting for him to be successful. So if this leads to another trilogy, I'd be okay with that. I just hope, again, like we talked about, that they kind of take their time with it a little bit.
I'm even ready to watch him teach Little League, coach Little League baseball again. So
I love hardball. Hardball's fantastic. All right, so we're going to move on to our next movie. It's another new one. The Matrix, by the way, The Matrix Resurrections, you could go see it in theaters or watch it on HBO Max for the next 20 or so days by the time this podcast comes out. Definitely, if you can get a chance and you feel safe enough, go see it in theaters because it'll probably be pretty badass in theaters. If you don't feel safe, watch it at home. That's what I did. All right, so our next one is a guy we talked about last year. He wrote and directed the Trial of the Chicago 7. This year he is back with Being the Ricardos. So we're going to get into the controversy surrounding this movie right from the get-go, Wayne, because I think we should address it. And the controversy is that Nicole Kidman and Javier Bardem essentially look nothing like Lucille Ball or Jesse Arnaz. And I think you should know that going in. This is not a remake of I Love Lucy. This is not meant to be the TV show. So I want to get that out of the way first.
Yes, and that's a lot of what people who initially were hoping for and were disappointed.
I think when people think of her, they think I Love Lucy. They don't think of that Lucille Ball was an actual person.
Yeah, they think Lucy Ricardo, the character that she portrayed, and in actuality, she was a very smart, very savvy businesswoman.
Yes. And, I agree. And even that being said, Nicole Kidman and Javier Bardem still don't look like them. But I do think they're great actors. And they're probably two of the best actors of their generation. Both Academy Award winners. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone more talented to play the role of Lucy. Now, the other option that people always floated out there was Deborah Messing. Now, if they ever did an I Love Lucy remake TV show, Deborah Messing is the person. She looks like her. She could play that bubbly, that character very, very well. I haven't seen her dramatic chops a lot. So I don't know that she would have been able to handle this movie.
You're making me tumble down the rabbit hole to do a remake of I Love Lucy. 1950s, very much, housewife and whatnot. Interesting theory, and like maybe done in like this day and age and what it would be like. And maybe Lucy is actually the guy this time. Like, you
never know. Yeah. I mean, there could be, you could switch it. Yeah.
It could be the guy's short for Lucifer or something. Hey.
Yeah. It's just, I'm also not one of those people. I know we have a few friends, and I know a lot of people specifically with this character because Lucy became a American icon. So there was a lot of people pissed off when they saw that she had got the role. To me, that doesn't bother me. I still haven't watched the Mr. Rogers movie, but the reason I haven't watched it isn't because Tom Hanks looks nothing like Mr. Rogers. I just haven't watched it yet. So that has never bothered me. If the actors perform the job well, then I'm okay with the movie because it's a movie. It'd be like the way I would equate it, and especially with this movie, because Aaron Sorkin was mostly a Broadway person, like in the 70s and 80s before he started getting into movies. And he wrote this movie feels like a play to me. Now, if this were a play and Nicole Kidman and Javier Bardem are cast as Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, people would not have a problem with it because it's a play and they understand that you can't do makeup and you can't make them look like those characters. But it's a movie, so everyone's like, oh, well, why couldn't they make her look like her or put prosthetics or whatever? Because that's not what this movie's about. This movie isn't about them recreating Lucille Ball. It's about a certain part in their life. It's about communism. It's about their relationship at the time that they were making the show and what it ended up, the relationship ended basically after the show ended.
While their marriage ended, they actually remained professional colleagues for many years after this.
Yeah,
and made
for many years. They were very cordial. I was reading some stuff. They were very cordial to each other afterwards. Obviously, they had the kids, which I think is funny. They had a daughter, Lucy, and a Ricky Ricardo Jr. Or Desi Ricardo Jr.
And how they basically forced the studios, like, well, we're having a kid. We're writing it into the show.
It's a groundbreaking moment.
Yeah, I mean, and they refused to use the word pregnant because it would give children the wrong idea. Okay, yeah, let's just talk about the stork flying in there. It's like
there was some good, as with most Aaron Sorkin films, there was some great dialogue. Yes. There were some good moments in what you're talking about, Wayne, when then we have to explain to our audience and how babies are made. He's like, is there a part of our audience that don't know how babies are made? And they're like, he's like, because this would be the bigger problem. So let's get to the movie now that we got kind of all the other stuff out of the way. I think Nicole Kidman and Javier Bardem are fantastic in this movie. They give great performances. I do think what I thought was cool is they dressed them up enough that their profiles, when you saw them like from a distance, they looked like the characters. Now then when you got up close, you realize that they didn't, they're facially, they didn't look like them. But I think they had the outfits and the styles down enough to where at certain points you're like, oh yeah, I could see him being Ricky Ricardo.
Thankfully, both Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball, they were so far out of my generation that I'm talking about the character, and it's like, all right, that's who I'm looking at right now. It's not I'm not actually looking at Lucy. So
that's exactly. You're watching a character piece essentially. Right. So this takes place in the middle of we're like the 4th episode of season 2 of their show.
Yep.
And there's a story that's about to hit that Lucille Ball is a communist. She went to the committee. That was back when the McCarthy hearings were going on, and he was labeling every celebrity a communist because he was a piece of shit.
Yep.
And we were scared of communists at that time, and we still kind of are, but we believed everybody. It was one of those pointing fingers like, oh, you think differently than us. You're a communist. They go on to explain why people thought she was. She was cleared, but there was still, the newspapers could sway public opinion. So the question, throughout the whole movie is like, what do we do? Who do we tell? Do we talk about it? Do we address it? What's the plan here? And Desi, because he was set up as the front hold of the family, he's looked upon as like, what are we going to do? So he's like kind of coming up with all these ideas, but in the background, you kind of get the sense that like Lucille Ball was more, the way they played it was that like a lot of the ideas were her ideas, but through Desi to make it seem like they were his ideas. Whether he knew that was happening or not, I don't know, because the movie doesn't really tell us. I get the sense that he probably did, that he realized what she was doing. Like you said, Wayne, she is a very smart businesswoman. She was very intelligent. She knew what she was doing. Before I saw this movie, I was talking to my mom about it, and I was like, oh yeah, they said that she was really kind of mean and a bitch. And I don't think that's the right.
That's what they called women who stood up for themselves back in the day, though. So, yeah. And what is the quote? Well-behaved women rarely go down in history. So,
right,
when
exactly.
they get into quote unquote these men of the time uppity or mouthy,
you have to realize where a lot of that her personality traits of description were coming from, and it was coming from white people, white men.
You mean the fragile white guys who can't really, take anybody disagreeing with them or get their little feelings hurt?
Exactly. So after seeing the movie, I kind of am like, oh, wait a minute. So she wasn't that. She was just someone who wanted to, control her image, control her family's image to the public, and be responsible, also responsible to the audience too. And like the whole pregnancy thing, like why are we hiding this? This is a beautiful thing. There should nothing that should be hidden about it. Go ahead, Wayne.
No, exactly. It's just, I'm all for calling somebody a bitch or calling somebody an asshole when it's deserved. But when somebody's just standing up for themselves and for their particular gender that they represent, or they're just being who they are, to be attacked and knocked down like that, it's just, it's irritating. And they talk about it so brilliantly in this, like, well, we could have her holding a laundry basket or have a pillow over her tummy. It's like, why hide it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do find it interesting, like you said, the fact that they let it happen, but they couldn't say the word pregnant. So I'd like to go back and watch that season and see what they said, because I don't remember. I've seen I Love Lucy, but just in the reruns and stuff on Nick at Night and stuff. So I never watched like the whole series or anything. So J.K. Simmons plays William Frawley, who is the husband of they don't have their other character names on
Fred
here.
Mertz.
Yes, and then Nina Arianda plays Vivian Vance, which when I saw her, I was like, who's Nina Arianda? I've never heard of her before, but I thought she did a pretty good job. And she actually kind of looked like Ethel. Yeah. So I thought that was good casting.
There's that back and forth between, the Lucy and Ethel characters about how the losing weight and wanting to look better. It's like, well, that's not really what your character is. So
yes, there's a lot, and there's a good scene towards the end where they kind of come to an understanding, which I thought was really nice. Let's see, Tony Hale as Jess Oppenheimer. I thought that was an interesting character for sure. Alia Shawkat as Madeline Pugh. Jake Lacey as Bob Carroll. Those three characters are basically telling the story. Their older selves are played by other actors. The only one of note that I know is the one that plays Bob Carroll is Ronnie Cox from Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2. Clark Gregg plays one of the people from CBS. And that's pretty much the notable cast in here. There's some other actors. There's a lot of actors in here and stuff, but those were the ones that I recognize. It's not my favorite Aaron Sorkin film, I would say, but I did enjoy it. It was an interesting story to tell. I think it's important for people to know going into this movie, this is not a biopic. I think, again, that's where a lot of the controversy comes from. There's nothing about this that is, it's not about her history of growing up and where, who she was as a child. And it's all about who she was at this point in time in her life and how she got to where she is. They do talk about her slow moving movie career that really never happened. But she went in, she started doing radio, and someone from CBS saw her and wanted to give her a TV show. And she, right then and there, she's like, I want to do a show where I play a woman similar to the radio show you're watching, but my husband is going to play my husband. And back then there was a lot of tension about having a Cuban man portray a white woman's husband on 1950s television. But she made it clear to them that if they wanted her, there would be, the only way she would do the show is if Desi played her husband. And so when you look at it too, and how much throughout the movie, a lot of the male characters want her to pay attention to Desi's feelings.
Right.
And what you see is like Desi essentially has the career that he has because of his wife. Right. So I think that's why Desi stood up for her. Even when they were having troubles in their marriage and he was sleeping around, he still respected her. He understood that without her, he probably wasn't where he was. And I think it shows that they, even though, like you said, Wayne, they remained friends and close even after their own divorce. I think they had a respect for each other that went beyond their own romantic love. And I think it's interesting to see that portrayed on screen. And like I said, I do think both of them were fantastic. I'm sure they'll probably get nominated for a bunch of stuff. Will they get Oscar noms? I don't know. It would be deserved if they did. But regardless, I think this movie itself will probably get lost in the shuffle. But what are your final thoughts, Wayne?
And it's a shame because, it's hard because if this movie was so misinterpreted so many times, as you touched on already. It's not a biopic. It's not made for TV, or it's not a movie about the TV show. It's about a specific period in the actors' lives, and very interesting, very compelling. And I think it's really misunderstood, and people came into it with a negative attitude. And it really, really helped me understand who these two actors and who these two people were, and what they were going through, and what they stood up for. And it's like, you know what? This is what it is. This is what we represent. So,
yeah,
fantastic job. I think it will be kind of pushed away to the side, unfortunately, but I really hope that these actors do get some recognition for this, because it was really a great movie.
Yes. Now, I will say there will be a chance for it to be nominated for Best Picture this year, because they have guaranteed for the first time ever that the Academy Awards will have to have 10 Best Picture nominees. They've opened it up since 2008, I believe, that you can nominate 10 films, but they've had to have a certain percentage to get in the list. This year, they've said, okay, 10 films will be nominated. There's no if, and, or buts about it. So that will allow movies like this, or Don't Look Up, which we'll be reviewing next week, which, again, middle of the road reviews, to get kind of in the back door there as a Best Picture nominee. So we'll see. And I would say 7.5 out of 10 for this movie. The acting alone, I think, pushes it up a level. Wayne, what are your final thoughts on the rating there?
I was thinking right 7.5 as well, just because, it was a little slow at times, but it's not anything that you're going to go in and be highly entertained. I can't wait to laugh my ass off. And no, it is what it is. Exactly. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is.
Exactly. Agreed. So yeah, you can catch that on Amazon Prime right now, or see it in theaters if you're so inclined to do so. All right, so we're going to move on to our next movie, and I know Wayne isn't a fan, and it was interesting to say the least. It doesn't even have its own Wikipedia page. Let me look it up here. It's Rage and Honor, I believe, right? All right, so this is your quintessential 90s straight to VHS actioner, with someone who was in a couple movies prior to this that we recognize her enough to put her in this movie, but she still plays second fiddle to the white male who has the bravado of, the action stars before him, and is kind of a shithead. It's called Rage and Honor. It's directed by Terrence H. Winkless. It's a franchise, believe it or not. They made several of them. The main American draw is Cynthia Rothrock, who got her career started with Michelle Yeoh in the early 1980s. And one of those, kind of like a Rush Hour type movie before Rush Hour. Fish out of water, white female detective in China, and she teams up with the Chinese cop, and they have to stop, bad guys or whatnot. Richard Norton plays Preston Michaels, the Australian cop, who they never really give a reason why he's in town. He's just kind of there. Brian Thompson, who plays Conrad Drago, no relation to Ivan Drago, I don't think. So that's basically it for the cast. I mean, there's other people in it, but Terry Trias plays Rita.
Let's not forget Catherine Bach, Miss Daisy Duke herself from the Dukes of Hazzard fame.
Yes, yep. She plays Captain Murdoch. And Stephen Davies, let's not forget that character named Baby. Weird. Which we then find out it was because he was a young guy on Wall Street, which really doesn't... That's why they called me Baby. Okay. He's like a whiz kid.
Yep.
All right, so Cynthia Rothrock plays like a karate teacher who ends up getting involved in this police revenge thing with these bad guys, who you find out later that her brother is actually the main villain, and he killed her sensei years ago.
It's just it's like, okay, come on. She's a high school teacher who just happens to know Kung Fu. It's like, all right.
It's Dangerous Minds mixed with Karate Kid, essentially.
Yep. I was thinking The Substitute and Karate Kid.
That's actually more of an apt comparison, because there's no... she doesn't really deal with troubled youth. It's more just like a teacher cleaning up the neighborhood, essentially, which is what the substitute is. So that actually, I had that thought too, which the substitute, I believe the substitute was a year later. So maybe the substitute was more like Rage and Honor.
Oh, I see. It
was more the white man going, hey, they can't take our movie idea from us, and then they release their own version of it. I will say, I thought the choreography in the beginning of the movie, there are 2 fight sequences for Cynthia Rothrock and then Preston Michaels, which is the character. Yeah, that's the character, Richard Norton. And I thought they were really well done. That was
they were pretty believable, I will say. I'm like, all right, as opposed to just totally fake punches and
exactly. Now they did use a lot of the like those kind of sound effects to fill in for the punches.
Yeah. But at least the punches looked like they were actually punches being thrown.
Exactly. It looked like they were connecting. They looked real. It wasn't as great later on in the movie, but so they must have like focused really hard in the beginning of the movie, and they were just like, fuck it, as they got on. And there were probably more actors later on, who didn't know the karate as much as Rothrock and the other actor, because Rothrock is like a karate champion and holds several belts. So like this is her thing. She became an actor secondary to what her normal job was, being a kick-ass karate person. She's not a very good actress or actor. You could really tell, and this movie does nobody any help. The dialogue is terrible, laughable at times. Oh my God, Wayne, when she tried to pretend to be like a valley girl to get into the bar, do you remember this? It was some of the worst acting I have ever seen. And it was like,
what the fuck?
She had no idea what she was doing. You could tell they probably didn't write it. And they were just like, go up to the guy and pretend that you're like a valley girl. And so she's like, oh my God, like, I'm meeting friends here. Could you like let me in? And that was it. That was the end of it. I'm like, what the fuck was that? And then they just end up like, Baby ends up getting them in, I think, or something. There's someone they know. I even forget how they get in, but they get in. Yeah, this was one of those ones I wasn't sure what to expect when I picked it, but it's something special in a way of how awful it truly is. The fact that they made more of them, I don't even know why. But back in the 90s, man, they were anything they could get on VHS, straight to VHS at the Blockbuster or the local video store they were going to do. And that's what these movies were made for. They were made for local VHS stores. They were made to go on your Cinemax late at night, because there is some provocative situations in it and stuff like that. It's not really like a soft porn. It's not like your typical like one of the ones we watched, which was like a softcore porn. It's not like that. What was that one? That was the Corey Feldman cop one, right? Yeah, that we watched. That was like basically like a Skinamax movie. Yeah, so there's a person that likes this type of movie. Wayne and I aren't it. No. It reminded me of Delta Force. It was super slow, super boring, really bad acting. Not bad in a way that was entertaining, really, either. It was just bad. So 3 out of 10, just because the choreography in the beginning was kind of cool. That's really all I gave it, Wayne. What would your rating be on Rage and Honor?
Right there, 2, 3. The same folks that like Delta Force will love this movie.
There's a tagline for you. If you love Delta Force, watch this piece of shit. All right. So we're moving on from Rage and Honor. Couple things I watched. I posted them online, so I won't go into great detail about them, but I'll just mention them here. Over the weekend, being the holidays, we were able to watch a lot of stuff. I rewatched Philomena, a really good British movie with Dame Judi Dench. Carrie Pilby was a good coming-of-age story on Netflix. Cop Shop with Gerard Butler was a cool 70s style action flick. Old from M. Night Shyamalan, did not care for. Stillwater with Matt Damon, also didn't really like that much. It was okay. Don't Breathe 2, a disaster. Don't watch. It was bad. There was this moment of like So if you're not familiar with Don't Breathe, it's about a man. The first one is about a man who's blind. These people break into his house to steal some shit, and it turns out that this guy is completely fucked in the head and a former military guy and can kill everybody. But there's also a deep, dark secret, which makes him irredeemable. Well, the second movie, they posture that he is now a good guy. And it's really hard to get past what he had done. It's not like he just kidnapped somebody, but he kidnapped somebody and then tried to self-impregnate her so he could have a daughter again. That's the twist in the first movie. In my opinion, there's really no way around that. Now, the bad guys, for that purpose, they had to make the bad guys worse, and they are worse, but they're all shitty people. And I don't care about any of them except for the little girl who's in the movie. That's really the only one you end up caring about. That being said, there's some good violence and gore and stuff, but other than that, it's a complete misfire of a movie. Yesterday was a bit better. Escape Room Tournament of Champions I liked. The Forever Purge I liked, and I really liked Fast Color, which is a movie on Netflix right now about a family of a trio of women who have special powers. So, but it's not like a superhero movie. It's more of a drama. I really like that one. Wayne, anything that you watched while you were recuperating?
Oh, man. I watched a lot of Christmas stuff this week. So, we're talking about Holiday Inn, White Christmas. Obviously, we watched the Home Alones again. We watched the Muppets Christmas Carol. I did get a chance to watch Happiest Season again, which is obviously fantastic. A lot of Christmas stuff going through the holidays and whatnot.
Good.
So.
Good. All right. So getting into news and notes this week, not a lot going on. So Michael Keaton joining Batgirl as Batman. Michael Shannon and Anche Trow reprising roles for Man of Steel for the Flash movie. John Wick 4 has been delayed another year to 2023. 1984 slasher The Mutilator is getting a sequel almost 40 years later called The Mutilator 2 for now, starring Terry Kaiser from Weekend at Bernie's, who many people may not know this, but Terry Kaiser, who is famous for being in Weekend at Bernie's, has actually gone on to star in a lot of horror or campy horror films. Releases coming up. Super Pumped, the story of Uber with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Kyle Chandler, and Uma Thurman debuts on Showtime February 27th. That is a new limited series. Deaths this last week. Sayaka Kanata, Japanese actor and singer known for doing Japanese dub of Anna and Frozen, dead at 35 years old. Sally Ann Howe from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, dead at 91. And Joan Didion, writer, dead at 87. And Desmond Tutu, dead at 90. He was famous in South Africa for being the one that helped get Nelson Mandela out of prison and all that, the apartheid. I'm really butchering this, but that's what
he's an anti-apartheid leader.
Yes, there you go. Wayne said it better. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening this week to our show. We hope everyone has a good New Year's and had a happy Christmas or a Merry Christmas, whichever you prefer, or happy holidays. New Year's is coming up, so hopefully you guys won't drink too much or get too sick. Wayne, any final thoughts before we end the show here?
Much like many people were looking forward to the Friends reunion, I am looking forward to returning to Hogwarts January 1st for the Harry Potter 20-year reunion, if you will.
Yes, that'll be fun. Look out for that. A bunch of new things coming up in January. I'm looking forward to watching the new Macbeth movie with Denzel Washington from Joel Coen. There's plenty of other things. The Peacemaker TV show comes out that same weekend. So lots of stuff coming in January.
If anyone is interested while I'm still sick, I am available for voiceover.
Get some interesting work there. Also, we will be talking about, I don't know when exactly, but Cobra Kai season 4 will be out next weekend. So we're not going to set up a whole review for it, but.
And the Book of Boba Fett. Very excited.
And that too. That's a little independent TV show on Disney Plus about this guy who is trying to get his life back together. I heard it's pretty good drama.
Yes, indeed.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to Now Showing with Mike and Wayne. We appreciate you.
Ronald Reagan, the actor?
Hasta la vista, baby.
Hey, everybody, we're all going to get laid.